It's Wednesday, February 28th. I'm Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. Today we continue our Black History Month conversations with a look at the experience of Black women in the workplace, everything from new employee and management perspectives to networking, allyship, and more. And welcome to folks watching on streaming, cbc.ca/NL. It's always nice, too, when we do these streaming shows, William Ping comes into the studio to read the news, and it's nice to have him here with all of the news that he reads and his presence as he gets up to go back upstairs to get ready for his next newscast. A couple of weeks ago, we spent a show talking about events taking place for Black History Month, as well as the theme, Black Excellence, a heritage to celebrate, a future to build. Today, we are focusing in on the future part of that theme and talking about the experience of Black women in the workplace and what needs to change inequity to equity, where folks can thrive. And there are no broken rungs in the ladder. And we'll explain what that means a little bit further on in the show. So joining me here in studio, welcome back, Laura Umba, founder of Race to Dinner NL, host of Out of the Fog Rogers TV, among many other things. How you doing?
I'm pretty good. Thanks for having me back.
Jacqueline Lee, Tequity co-founder, CEO, Polyunity. Thank you for coming back.
Of course. Thank you, Adam.
Peace Godwin, business and data analyst, consultant at Deloitte Canada. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Adam.
And Gift Mba, marine engineer, Windstar Cruises, studying for a master's degree in applied technology, ocean technology. I missed ocean there. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
All right, Laura Bell, let's start with yourself. Just how did we all get here? Because this is based on a Tequity conversation, right? But
Yes.
if you could just kind of fill that in, and then we'll go from there.
Absolutely. So, February, Black History Month,
There you
like
go.
we talked about. So I made a promise to myself earlier on this year that any organization I was part of in any capacity, whether it was through membership, I paid dues, or anything, I needed them to acknowledge Black History Month. And Tequity is a space that I've been privileged enough to show up to as authentically as possible for most cases. So as we got into February, I sent Jacqueline a message on our Slack channel. I was like, hey, it's February. Don't know if we have a plan for Black History Month, but I would like us to do something. And so I don't really care what the thing is. If we need support in any way, let me know. But I really think it would be important to have a conversation.
Jacqueline, so you get this message on Slack. You have a bunch of thoughts. I know you put up a post about it too. So what came to mind first, and what followed?
Yeah, I mean, my instant gut reaction is no, just because it's not something I know anything about or can resonate with. But I mean, that is why the group was founded, to have these conversations and to educate and learn together. So my immediate response usually is yes, absolutely, let's do it. If I feel any bit of uncomfortableness at all, it feels like it's a good topic.
Yeah.
So
well, I think also maybe it
Yeah.
speaks to why you are where you are, right? Because you're like, oh, my gut's saying no, but I know that this speaks to something, so let's go and do it.
Exactly, yeah. So, I mean, kudos to Laura Bell for bringing it up. I'll certainly never miss it again. Can't wait for next year to figure out what we'll dig into. But I know we'll talk about this in this next hour, but it was an amazing conversation to be a part of. And I'm so thankful to Laura Bell for bringing it up. What did you learn briefly? Just what's something that kind of came up for your learning from this, from being part of this whole thing? Oh, my gosh. There were many aha moments or things that were eye-opening for me. Laura Bell's recounting of her experience in 2020. I mean, that just went over my head. I was so, as like many of us, were so consumed with what we were dealing with. And her experience was completely different. And I'm certainly, when I think back to my experience, whether there were any people of color in my circle, in my network, and in my company, I certainly didn't give it a second thought to reach out and see how they felt and were they supported. So that was certainly eye-opening for me. The fact that, I mean, we certainly have a diversity problem in Newfoundland, and we're not open or transparent about that. So we sort of scratch our heads and say, why are not people of color or other diverse backgrounds applying? We have the diversity statement in our job ads. We say that we're diverse. It's part of our values, and so why aren't they applying? But folks are looking at our our board of directors, they're looking at our leadership team, they're looking at who we hire, and if they don't see it, they're not going to apply. They're also chatting with your former employees and your current employees, and they might have not shared that with the leadership when they left, but they are certainly sharing that with people that reach out and get their opinion. So if you are a company that wants to be diverse and you're not there yet, I think you need to be open about acknowledging that you have a problem, that you're committed to working on it, and that you want to do that in cooperation with your whole staff.
Before I get to our other two great guests here, Laura Bell, for context, do you mind if we the bit about 2020?
Yeah.
And because I think it's such an important part for the conversation with Jacqueline and then what we're going to be talking about today, because your perspective for this and the company side of it, it's really huge.
Yeah. So for a lot of people, 2020 was like our pandemic year, and that's what we all market. But for me, it was also the year George Floyd got murdered. So while we were all working remotely, I was navigating a pandemic, but I was also navigating for the first time we watched a Black man get murdered. And people were arguing over whether or not he deserved to die or what he could have done to stay alive. And so when we go into work on our spaces, everyone was like, how are you handling the pandemic? How are you handling the pandemic? But no one was asking, we just watched this happen.
And it was everywhere, right?
There was nowhere you could have turned where you either did not see the video or the conversation was not about what could have been done, what he should have done, what would have made it any different. So while people were checking in on this pandemic is really scary, all of that, you're watching Black people all over the world suit up, buckle down, and be like, we're just gonna go into work and pretend that our lives were not just rocked. And no one was asking about how we were navigating those spaces.
Yeah. So this is for companies and businesses and places, workplaces across Newfoundland and Labrador and beyond, it's such an important point to think about for anything in the future that happens for
Absolutely.
folks who are in and amongst us, our colleagues, our friends, our coworkers, for why it's important to check in when something is happening and try to have that kind of understanding.
Yeah.
All right, let me go to my other couple of guests here. Just for introductions first, Peace, tell us a bit more about, I gave the intro, business and data analyst consultant at Deloitte. Tell us more.
Well, I'm currently a consultant at Deloitte, and I've worked as a business analyst and also as a data analyst. I was an immigrant in Canada in 2019. I finished it from MUN, Masters in Economics. And getting into the corporate world was kind of a bit rocky for me, but I eventually got in, which was cool. And it's been one opportunity to another. Although there's been challenges, when you get into those kind of spaces, you just need to know what kinds of challenges has been, going on for maybe some while. And that's what I did. I had to find out, okay, how do I navigate the corporate world in Canada as a Black woman? I had to educate myself. So, what are the challenges? And I had to look for who would be my mentor, kind of. And when I got a mentor, that made it easy for me. So I rose up the ranks quite a bit faster than someone else may, usually not rise up that rank that fast, right? A Black woman. And that was because I had help. I had the opportunity to be mentored. I had, Black mentors within, and that was helpful for me as well.
Before I move to Gift, what were some of the challenges, if you don't mind me asking?
So I would say there were double discriminations, for example.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I'm a Black woman. That's like being Black and being a woman.
Yeah.
So it's like, there's this double discrimination, subtle microaggressions. There are side comments that people would make that are aggressive, but, some of them wouldn't even know that those are microaggressions, right? They just make those comments. And I found that I was navigating that kind of path when I started, in corporate Canada. And those were just some of the challenges that I had to face.
Okay. All right. Gift. Tell us more about yourself.
Okay, I'm Gift. I'm a master's student at Memorial University of Newfoundland, currently studying applied ocean technology at the Marine Institute. I used to work on board ships. My last vessel was a cruise ship with Windstar Cruises, mostly going from place to place, doing what I really enjoy doing, and working on the engines and, meeting people, facing different challenges daily. So it was good.
Working on a ship engine.
Yes.
How's it? That sounds like a lot. I know that you're training, but still, from my time on ships, I was always really bad on the engine side of things. So, what is it about this that draws you in for your work?
For me, I like the challenge of solving problems. So I knew that working on engines meant you had to think on your feet. You have to be ready for different kinds of challenges every day. There are no 2 days that are the same. Generally, yeah.
And given the topic of today's show,
Yeah.
what are some extra challenges that you've seen, or from talking to colleagues, or for yourself as a Black woman that you've run into in whether it's your studies or also in out working with ships?
Okay, while working, just like P said, it was kind of double challenges, being Black and then being a woman. And generally, being a woman in that space as an engineer is a little bit tricky. There are very few women even up to date, although now we have more women going into that field. But still, I mean, it's nothing compared.
Dude-centric, eh?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
So you need to work extra hard. I would say double or triple the effort that your colleagues are putting in. You need to be present. You need to be so focused. You're almost self-conscious. You cannot afford to make mistakes because it's gonna be big deal.
For a mistake, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you said big deal. Yeah, it can be amplified further than perhaps for other people, or definitely for other people, right? Like a mistake could hang over you much more, and so you have to be extra. Like you're saying, you have to be doubly good.
You have to be very good. And when I say mistake, it doesn't even have to be some mechanical mistake. It could just be what you said at the wrong place or to the wrong people.
So how do you navigate that? Like when if it's the wrong thing said at the wrong time, how much self-censorship must go on?
I would say the company where I work, the companies I've worked for a few, have always had the policies, in place for equality, for everybody being able to understand each other. And generally, working on a ship means you're going to be working with people from different backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. So usually we could have several nationalities on board. When I say a mistake, it could be something that's supposed to be funny and maybe somebody didn't find it funny. It could be coming from you or directed towards you.
Yeah.
So it's either ways.
It takes a lot of understanding.
It does.
Yeah, and not everyone is always understanding when it comes to this type of thing.
Yes.
I'm thinking about, and Jacqueline, with the post you put out, it was also linked to this, is it the McKenzie Study, right? Can you just briefly tell us, just like the Coles Notes version of like what the study, because they do the study each year, right? It's for Canada and North America. And what are some of the things that it said?
Yeah, you're putting me on the spot here. There were some statistics in there that were quite alarming. There's a wage disparity, obviously.
Yeah.
Even women of color compared to white women, I think there's a 80-cent disparity, 80 to 100 disparity. And then even just promotions. And this is where the broken rung thing came in, I believe. And we're so focused on the C-suite and representation around the board table, but it starts much, much lower than that. I mean, these are entry-level or your first managerial level positions. And if we're not promoting a diverse pool at that level, my gosh, like we're never going to get to the point at those higher levels where we have a diverse pool
And that's
to draw
great.
from.
And this is great for just general understanding. Well, first, when we say C-suite, what do we mean? It's the high, like,
Yeah, I mean, it's the highest level in any
highest level,
corporation,
exactly.
I would think. Yeah.
right? The folks, the decision makers, the bosses of the bosses, like the executive level, right? C-suite. And before the show, we were talking about, like, when I was growing up, it was all about, like, you would hear about the glass ceiling. And then, like, when you sent me the study, I was like, oh, broken rung. What does that mean? So I was, like, Googling it before the show today. And, like, the idea of a broken rung applies to the corporate ladder in general. And a broken rung creates an incredible climbing challenge. So rather than saying the barrier is at the top for, like, you can't get into that C-suite, that higher level, way further down, there's a rung that's broken, so you can't get above that. I mean, that's the concept here. Do we have any thoughts about the broken rung?
That's the root of any of these problems, trying to get more girls in STEM, trying to get more women of color in C-suite positions. We never start early enough at the problem. What do you think, Laura Bell?
I think it's like when we were watching the video during the Tequity session where we were talking about the broken run. We worry so much that we don't get to that C-suite. But if we don't make it to being a manager, we're never going to get to the C-suite. We haven't become a manager at any level. And people always say you promote from within and all of that.
You got a snake in your ladder game here, right?
Exactly.
You're going up and you can't get above that level because you're sliding down.
Like
or
mid-level. And so it's like when they say, oh, we don't have any diverse applicants within our organizations because you didn't promote any diverse applicants to that level. You can't hire from what's not there. And if you're not mentoring or training what's not there, you continue to have that excuse of, well, it wasn't there, so we had to hire the most qualified. If you're not giving us a chance to be qualified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and go ahead.
I also think that from this perspective, sometimes even when, people of different diversities, we are concentrating on the Black woman now. And sometimes you find yourself in a position where you actually qualify for something. You've actually worked very hard to get there. And people just give you that attitude like it was handed down. It was handed over to you because you're a Black woman. They were just trying to fill in the position. They were just trying to
diversity
meet
hire.
the diversity. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, actually, I'm super qualified and competent and better, and I am the best candidate.
I got that a lot.
This is not something that was just given.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now you have the challenge of proving that indeed you qualified for that.
That's a lot of extra
Exactly.
stress and burden, right? To think, as opposed to being like, oh, even when you're the most deserving candidate, but then to have that feeling of that aura as you walk around a workplace and thinking, like, whether people think it, like, it may not be everyone, if it's just one but like just having that thought out there. Yeah. What's it like to carry that around? It must be awfully stressful.
I just started calling. I've had employers who are like, oh, why did you think you got the job? And I was like, well, you have a diversity statement. I am qualified, but just so you know, people are going to think this is why you hired me, so you should be prepared to answer this question so I don't have to.
Well, and you would think that, so for the hiring thing, it would be the memo that goes out in places. It should be like, hey, here's all the reasons why this person is awesome, right? And just to get,
just so you know.
Just so you know. Because, I mean, that should happen anyways when people get hired regardless, right? It's like, hey, everyone, this is the new person. They're great. Like, you should celebrate everyone you hire.
But yeah, no, it is exhausting walking around where people think you are a diversity hire, and then you have to prove that you're not and that you're qualified. And when we were talking once about like Black excellence, how you have to be the best, and I was like, I'm going for Black mediocrity, so that I'm just like, you just assume that I am qualified for this and that this is where I'm supposed to be. It's not that I have 5 more degrees than the person who actually qualifies for this role, because usually Black women are coming in overqualified for the positions they're applying for. True. Because we have to have those overqualifications to even be considered to be at the table.
And then there are sometimes you see, Black women who are qualified, but they don't even go for the job. Like, they don't even apply. So there's this self-doubt that, oh, I might apply and I might not get picked, because I'm Black or whatever. And they don't go for the job, and the job goes to someone else. So there's even that place of self-doubt that you don't even apply to begin with.
So from self-censorship for talking sometimes to self-doubt, and then your own career limiting because of the ecosystem that you're working in and functioning in, and it's not set up for folks to thrive.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you begin to work against yourself.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. You spoke about this at the meeting.
Yeah.
Like when you're in evaluating a company, do you want to join them or not? And you don't see any black people there.
Yeah.
There's this whole thought process where you're
Absolutely.
like, do I want to be
Do I want to be your
the
experiment?
the experiment? To,
And so, yeah,
'cause it's
there,
extra work, right?
yeah, there are positions that I've looked at and I've been like, this would be such a dream job.
Yeah.
And then I creep LinkedIn and I creep your staff posting and I was like, one, if they're limited women, I was like, oh, okay. And then if there are no racialized people at all, I was like, yeah, I'm not ready to be the first racialized woman in, because then it's like your entire corporate culture isn't built for me to thrive in here. And so I'm just not going to put myself in that position.
And what's the extra work that would have to come with that to go into somewhere?
So it's the preparing that where when we talk about microaggressions or racism based in ignorance, they've have this whole corporate culture where they're used to talking a certain way. The jokes that fly around are a certain kind of joke. And then I walk in and then it's like, oh, we have to change. We can't say this because she's there.
Yeah, you walk
We
in,
can't do
you feel the room, temperature changes, the conversation
everything,
changes. You're
and
like,
then
wait,
all
what
eyes are
happened?
on you and you're like, and then that's exhausting. And so it's either then I'd be like, I check myself where I'm like, I'm going to give you the room to make these jokes, even though they are self-deprecating and they put me in a situation where I'm uncomfortable, or I'm going to be like, you can't make these jokes because they are insensitive and unequitable. And they're like, well, we've always been this way. And if not for you, it would continue this way. And it's like, do I feel like having those conversations? Do I feel like being the reason to break this? If the corporate culture has allowed this, it's exhausting to be the one to do that work all the time and not. Because then when you're doing the work, the organization isn't always supportive of being like, yeah, we need to change. Sometimes like, well, this is just the way it's always been. Just adjust, culture fit. And I was like, I don't want to fit.
No, and we only have like the bank accounts of emotional currency that we all have. Like for just doing a job,
Absolutely.
you're spending a fair bit of your savings.
Exactly.
And then to have the rest on top of that, no.
It's like I still have to, after 5 o'clock, I still have to go out into the real world. And the real world is not particularly nice for racialized individuals anyway. So why do I have to put on all of this just to get my paycheck when I could go to other places? It might not be as much money, but it's so much less emotional labor.
Yeah.
And I can leave not exhausted at the end of the day.
That study, the McKenzie one that we were mentioning, they had a couple of myths there, right? And we've heard this word a couple times in the show, microaggressions. And here's what it says. So it's for the 2023, like the report provides an intersectional look at the specific biases and barriers faced by Asian, Black, Latina, and 2S LGBTQ plus women and women with disabilities. And it's got a few myths, right? One of them, myth. Microaggressions have a micro impact. Reality. Microaggressions have a large and lasting impact on women. We've briefly talked about what microaggressions mean, but can we just talk a little bit more on the impact and how and what it can have? Because I do find when I'm out and about, some people will even like roll their eyes and joke about, almost like it's a new generational thing. Like people with their microaggressions nowadays, everyone's so sensitive. It's like, well, unless you know someone who's been impacted by that, I don't think you get to judge the weight of it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think for all of us, anyone who's part of a marginalized community knows the weight of a microaggression because it's not just one-off. It's one-off from one person, but there are lots of little people throwing that at you. So, like, there's a wonderful video that exists on YouTube that talks about a microaggression like a mosquito bite. If you get one mosquito bite, fine, it's itchy. Yeah. But if you're constantly being bitten by mosquitoes all day, it's like a full-blown rash. You're scratching. There's no comfort in existing anymore. So the weight of microaggressions, you begin to chip away at parts of yourself just so you have less to deal with in those spaces. So it could be for Black women simply as making sure your hair is palatable enough for the workspace. And it's because someone will make a comment like, oh, your hair was long yesterday, but it's short today. Is it going to be different 2 days from now? And it's like, you know what? I give up. I'm going to show up in a hairstyle that you are comfortable with so you don't ask me questions, regardless of what I like and what I feel. And so those kind of things where you edit yourself so you don't have to deal with them. And then you're no longer the person you were meant to be, the person you want to be. You're a person who fits into the space that society or this culture has deemed appropriate for you.
I've noticed just in my own life, right? Like I can be, so everyone who listens to the show knows, like my wife's from South Korea, right? And because of this, I think I noticed some more things, right? When your spouse is from another country. So a lot of times when I'm out and about, and if I'm with someone who is like a newcomer or something, if we're in a conversation, I notice eye contact a lot. And there are times when people will just talk to me and the person next to me is not being kind of looked at. And I was like, I'm sorry that it took so long in life to understand this. but that it was like Jacqueline, an aha moment. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I get this. And imagine how I would feel. And micro, but it's macro, right?
Yeah.
And the impact there of feeling not seen, gigantic.
I think it's so much more dangerous.
Yeah.
It's so subtle, and sometimes it's just a look or a comment, and it's like, did they mean that? No one else seemed to have a problem with that. Maybe it's me, and it's just it builds up, like you said, and it's so subtle, and it's so hard to point out or go back, and you let the moment pass because you're so uncomfortable and you don't know what to say. You think of great comebacks like hours later. But in the moment, like, it's so hard to be like, wait now, let's just pause here. That was really wrong. And it's just so not obvious to most people. Like, you would never have seen that before, right?
No,
but
and then
now
when you do
it's like
see
you
it,
can.
you try to will the person with your eyes to look. You're like, yes, and then you look at the person, and then you're like, and you're like, are you? As opposed to just being like, hey, and moving their face, right, to look at them, which is like, there's a few boundaries that crosses, but it's like just having having that small level, and then having the realization there's obviously so much more.
And I think it also makes us want to, please people. So when those comments are thrown at us, we go home and reflect, and you're like, okay, maybe if I do it this way, this person is going to be pleased. Another thing is, it also makes us want to isolate. So we go to work and we know this person is constantly getting at our nerves, but we just want to isolate. So we go into a separate office just to do work, just so that we don't deal with that, right? And so there's no, socials. You don't go to socials and all of that just because, something might come up. There might be comments, there might be a look or something like that would throw you off.
You are listening to The Signal. For all the folks watching on live stream, cbc.ca/NL. Hello. Today, it's a furthering of a continued conversation around Black History Month with a look at the experience of Black women in the workplace, everything from new employee and management perspectives to networking and allyship. Here in studio, we have Laurabelle Umba, founder of Race to Dinner, host of Out of the Fog on Rogers TV, St. John's, public speaker, program manager. The list goes on for a couple more pages. We've got Gift Umba, a marine engineer, Windstar Cruises, studying a master's degree in applied ocean technology. Peace Godwin, business and data analyst consultant at Deloitte Canada. Jacqueline Lee is also here, Tequity co-founder plus CEO of Poly Unity. There we go. That's the show reset. I'm glad you're all here for this. Mentorship, right? So we talked about entering levels. We talked about a broken rung in the ladder. And Peace, you mentioned for yourself how important mentorship was. So that's one thing that companies can have. Do you want to just kind of reiterate that for folks if they just joined us? And then I'm just curious about what else can be done to fix that broken rung in the ladder.
So yeah, mentorship is really, really important. So and I think the mentorship should be coming from people like us. So when you get into a company as a Black woman, it's very important to be mentored by someone who looks like you. So, and that someone needs to be in a higher position than you are. Let's say in a leadership position, most preferably. So for me, it worked that way. I had mentors, they were leaders. So these were people that I could, vent to, my frustrations to. And they were there to advise. And I know one time I got into something with a coach, and, my mentor was there to just guide me on how to navigate that situation. And it didn't turn out to be messy. So mentorship is really, really important. And because of that mentorship, I was able to, learn about the challenges, particularly to the companies I've worked with, and also to, navigate those challenges and rise up to the level I am today, just because I had a mentor who was guiding me through.
Understanding that you're not alone in your experience must be it's a gigantic thing.
Oh, yes, it is. In fact, something might just happen at work and I'm calling my mentor. The person is there for me. it's so fulfilling to know that someone is there to listen to you and to help you. Something might just happen and I'm just calling my mentor, hey, this is what happened and I don't know how to react to this. What do you think? Something like that. It's really important, yeah.
And that first time you did that, and when they said something like, oh, yes, I know, I understand.
Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
Yeah, you are in that space where you're like, aha, this person understands me, like 100%. This person understands what I'm saying. You're not going to someone who doesn't understand what you're saying. The person understands perfectly and might have been in that position or that situation and is in a very helpful position to advise and say, okay, do it this way or don't do it that way, something like that.
Yeah, how to stick handle things,
Yeah.
to use a, I guess, hockey reference. Any other thoughts on just either mentorship or...
Yeah, so I agree a lot with what P said. Is like it's fantastic when you have mentors who look like you, come from your walk of life, because then you don't have to explain the situations. But when you're in situations that you don't have them, it is fantastic if other people in leadership positions take it upon themselves to see the inequities and be like, I know our leadership, our C-suite is looking highly homogenous. And if we want to have diversity, we're going to have to step out of our comfort zone first, educate ourselves about where those inequities lie, and then choose to mentor people who are from different walks of life from us. I think taking that onus is where allyship really comes in, because it's one thing to say you're an ally, but it's another thing to actually do the work. And I think that might be where leadership sometimes doesn't, because it's easy to mentor people who look like you, sound like you, come from your background, because you see yourself in them and you want them to achieve at least what you've gotten, if not better. It takes extra work to look at someone who is underrepresented, marginalized, and be like, I see you are not where you should be, where you could be, where you deserve to be, and I'm going to use my privilege, my voice, to get you toward the position you deserve to have. And I think that's what we're asking of people in that C-suite or any level of that managerial journey, to be like, you see what could be, you see the potential. Like, you can train skill to anybody, you can teach anybody just about anything, but when you have someone who has the desire and the joy of what they're doing and you don't encourage it within them, that's where we see organizations have ridiculous amounts of turnover, and they keep asking, why aren't our diverse people staying?
Yeah, and then that, I guess that would show a lack of understanding, a giant lack of understanding, where you're just like, oh, it's the problem with the people we're hiring, it's not us. And it's like, well, but if it's high turnover, maybe the call's coming from inside the house, right? Jacqueline, for your level, right? Like, so.
Yeah, I think allyship is more of a culture that you need to cultivate. I mean, mentorship is fantastic when possible, when there's mentors readily available in the skill set that you need. So, I mean, you're lucky, but I think you're the exception piece with finding a mentor that really resonated and spoke to you. So, like, what do the rest of us do when there's a lack of mentors? So I think allyship is critically important, to just recognize what barriers exist in your corporation, in your community, and do everything that you can to just help remove those barriers. So that's not for one staff. I mean, that's for your entire diverse staff, or people that deserve equity support. So yeah, like, I really resonate with what you said. Like, I just think allyship should be a culture, and mentorship is just too defined and one-on-one, and the problem is bigger, and there's more need than mentors. So we got to think about this problem a little bit differently.
And I guess it would also involve, I find a lot of, everyone in all of our lives, we walk with, our own bubble around us, right? So that's our life, our family, and what we pay attention to. But when it comes to this conversation and different workplaces, it sounds like a lot of bubbles either to be expanded or maybe completely burst in order for stuff to get in, to understand, like the events of 2020, like what someone might be going through, and the need to listen. But then before the show, I said, well, it's great as a time of listening. But what did you say, Jacqueline, after that? It was about taking action. I'll give it away.
I mean, I go to lots of DEI spaces, and you see folks show up. So showing up is great. I mean, at least you showed up, but they listen, and they're largely silent. And so I think sometimes in certain spaces and conversations, we take listening a bit too far. And there's questions going through our mind that we're terrified to say out loud and articulate. And I think this is what Laura Bell's organization, Race to Dinner, is trying to like squash. Creating these spaces where you can ask questions that may be racist. I think you have a few, only 1 or 2 rules, but like no racial slurs, but like ask the question that you are terrified to raise anywhere else. So let's create those spaces where, yes, we listen and yes, we learn, but you got to articulate and say out loud the things that are on your mind, or like progress is just going to be too slow otherwise.
Yeah, you're not going to learn it, right? But yeah, and go ahead.
Sometimes in navigating this mentorship aspect of things, it might not be somebody that would tell you exactly, like what you should be doing. Maybe you have questions or you're in a situation. It might be somebody who is raising the right questions to you. There are certain situations when somebody asks you, is this what you want, for example? And that sets you thinking, is this what I really want? Asking you the right questions that you end up finding the answers by yourself. Sometimes just that is enough.
So have you had that?
Yes, a couple of times. In my field, it's been very difficult to find somebody, in my position or somebody who understands what I'm going through exactly, especially when I started. So many times I reached out to people who weren't even part of the organization, and I was able to get, help, assistance, support from them. And what I usually do is I tell myself I'm going to be the person I didn't have for other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's it.
It's obviously so important, but that for some, like you'd be able to get to the position you're in, and then to think, well, wait, now we've got a younger crop, new people coming in.
Yes.
So then we'll start that mentorship that, you've had, right?
Yes.
It's such a gigantic bit. Newfoundland and Labrador. A lot of people talk about. That's how I change topic. Like that's how I move the show along. Like, and I always, for every show, I just say randomly Newfoundland and Labrador, and everyone's like, "Oh, he's going to say something completely different now." Networking. People talk, "Oh, everyone knows everyone here," and blah blah blah. And it's so like once you're in, you can get in, you make friends, and like networking is a big thing. Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, all of us, we call ourselves friendly for everyone who lives here. But if you're just moving here as a newcomer, it takes you maybe a couple of days before you consider yourself a Newfoundlander and Labradorian, or maybe a little bit longer. What should we think about when it comes to networking for jobs, and what should be changing, or how is it working from your experiences?
It needs work.
Yeah.
If we're being very honest, it needs work.
Right.
It's on life support as of right now. I think most Newfoundlanders and Labradorians know each other depending on how you got here. I think like the immigrant community knows itself. Yeah. The racialized community knows itself. Do we know the rest of the province? So there's like the stat in not just in Newfoundland, Labrador, but the stat between racialized and non-racialized folks. 91% of non-racialized people do not have racialized people within their friend circle. 91%. So that means, how am I supposed to network if in the spaces where you're chill and you're hanging and you're just talking, people who look like me, sound like me, come from my walk of life are not in those circles? Racialized people have made friends with racialized people as a sense of survival because we don't have our communities in that large number. So we've built communities to know, to navigate, to foster networking. But because Newfoundland Labrador for so long has had to protect itself, it's not always doing such a great job about letting other people in beyond the, hey, how are ya?
Yeah, like if you get a flat tire, your tire will be fixed on the side of the road, and you might be invited to dinner that one time. Yeah. But down the road, like Friday, when October rolls around, are you invited to the social event? No. Right? And this is inclusion. What we're talking about. Like,
absolutely.
It's just a broad societal inclusion discussion. If you have pockets of folks who it's like, oh, newcomers, racialized folks, friends, networking, and then people who've been friends together in pockets since like high school or university, but then no additions.
No new friends.
I wonder why some things can be the way they are. Any other thoughts around this?
I want to go back to Kif's point that she just made. We ask our new staff, and this is just something we learned this year, we ask our new staff we should ask all our staff, what do you need to thrive in this position? How do you need to be supported? And you don't just ask it once. You ask it often and repeatedly.
Follow-up.
Whether it's crossing their mind when you ask it or not, or whether they're too afraid to speak up, like, you got to keep asking until you get an answer. And the onus is on the company to ask and not wait for the employee to raise their hand and say, I need this. Like Mo, one of our software developers, came to us and asked if we could become a designated employer, and that would fast track him on the through the Atlantic Immigration Program and for his permanent residency. Now I speak about this often because I was completely surprised at how easy it was for us and how free it was for us and how little time it took. And I'm embarrassed that Mo had to come ask me.
Yeah, you feel like you
Right.
should have known that, right?
So I'm like, every other small business and startup can do this. This is something easy you can do. And as a government, we don't do the best job at explaining the program and how it's not just to foster folks into, to bring them here to Newfoundland, but how do you retain the staff that you have, and how do we keep the graduates coming out of MUN here in the, I don't want to divert this conversation, but it's an example of,
It's all connected, right? I mean, we did a show a couple of weeks ago talking
Yeah.
about the fact that when you look at Newfoundland and Labrador compared to other provinces, our retention rates are lower
Terrible, yeah.
compared to other provinces. And there are reasons for that. And some of those reasons are coming up here today as a part of this discussion.
this is why we founded Equity. Like, as long as you identify as a woman, you are welcome. And I want all sectors and all ages and all colors to come, and let's have conversations and learn together. So I think that's what's happening. I think it's really cool. And I mean, this is how we met.
Yeah, it absolutely.
This is how I
is.
met you two ladies. So, yeah, it's really important.
Any thoughts on what Jacqueline's saying?
Yeah, I saw her post on LinkedIn about becoming a designated employer. And for me, that was a big step, because I was like, this is one thing that most newcomers need. I mean, if you don't have a job, there is really no point sticking around. So that is one thing that would make people want to leave the province. That's one thing that makes people, it's difficult to actually walk up to your employer and ask, okay, most times, I mean, somebody asked, most times it's difficult to walk up to your employer and ask, could you become designated or something like that? Because some employers may not be that approachable, and most people will take a job that even pays less, and they are less comfortable because it's going to get them what they want. I mean, people want peace of mind to actually know that I'm here for the long run and I'm going to give my best at this because this is what I want to be doing. I enjoy doing this. I have to, give my very best at it. But if you are not settled, then your mind is all over the place.
Yeah, well, you're always the runway in front of you has an end, right? As opposed to it being like a highway you can drive on forever with permanent residency. You're like, this thing's ending now, and then what happens when I get to the end of it? If I'm not taken off to go somewhere,
then you're constantly looking elsewhere instead of focusing on giving your best at what you're doing right now. You're looking elsewhere because you know that, okay, this might not keep me here. This might not be for the long run, or whatever the reasons are. I mean, we all have different reasons, different focuses. Yeah.
Well, and it prevents putting down roots. It prevents trying to find larger community. Because if you think, there's an expiration date on your time somewhere, something that can become a friendship, it's like, maybe I'm not going to call this person because I might not be here next month.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to see. And I've lived it too, right? From living abroad for 10 years, whether it was South Korea and Japan, I know those feelings, right? And if you don't have roots somewhere and you're intending to leave, that changes the math for you and how you are.
How you communicate, yeah.
Any other thoughts on that?
No, just agree.
You're just nodding.
I'm nodding because it's like, these are conversations that I've had the pleasure of having with people before. This is these are things that we've talked about. These are things that are real for a lot of us. So it's nice to be able to hear and be in a space where other people can be part of this conversation, because it's happening in racialized communities. It's happening in migrant and immigrant communities already. But it's nice to get other people to hear these conversations, because they are the people who have a lot of the power to make the change that we need made. Because we can say it to ourselves all we want, but we're not currently sitting in positions to impact that change.
So what are the aha moments like, whether it's with Race to Dinner or whether it's with Tequity, when you do see, and if it's a question that you're like, whoa, okay, that's a question,
Yeah.
but then there's an aha moment afterwards. What's that like?
It gives me hope because it means that at the very least, now you see me.
Yeah.
Now you see not just me, you see others like me, racialized, marginalized folks. You finally see us. And when you see me, then you can decide what you want to do, but at least you acknowledge I exist. And the world that you live in is not the world I live in. So for a lot of people, when we ask, what's the point of Race to Dinner? What's the point of doing all this? I was like, it's just to be seen and to create safety. The goal at one day will be change, but at least I know you see our issues, you see our problems, you see the way we navigate the world. I hope you change because I hope people are good and inherently want to do good. But at least there's safety knowing that I'm seen. Because then when things happen, it's not because you didn't see me, it was because you made a choice. And then I can decide how to navigate once your choice has been made.
Is there any aha moment that stands out for you? And you can
Yes.
sanitize it however you want.
Absolutely. I think my biggest aha moment was with family.
Okay.
I think because my son's biracial, so we have a multiracial family. So it was the first time that I talked about race with the family, because I had the pleasure up until my son was born, not really talk. If I didn't want to deal with it, I didn't have to acknowledge it, and I didn't for most of the time. But during 2020, we talked, and it was this became real for them too. That I was not alone in this fight, that when Theo asked what was done, he wouldn't just be asking me. He had a bunch of other people who were accountable to him, and they needed to say something too for him. So those, my biggest ahas were family ahas and friends ahas, because it meant you saw all of me, you valued all of me, and then you decided what parts of me you were willing to fight for.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty big.
Yeah, it's just, it gives me reason to do it.
Yeah.
Jacqueline, these events, for aha moments, or even for yourself, just like something that kind of, like, I started the show asking you this, but like, what's something that kind of came through? You're like, oh, right.
I just feel this deep, profound responsibility as a leader, that it's just not okay to be quiet anymore. You can't look around you and not. And I think I came to this realization when I adopted my son. So my son's Inuit, and he's now got 2 white parents, and he's navigating a world that I knew nothing about. So I was certainly ignorant of Indigenous issues before I became a mom of Nathan, but now I'm like, I can't ignore it anymore. Like, he's in this world, and it's now my world, and so now I care about Indigenous issues. But like 6 years ago, now he's 9, so 10 years ago, it didn't cross my mind on a day-to-day basis. So I think it's irresponsible of us to ignore our staff, to ignore our lack of diversity in our companies. And when you don't know, you ask questions. You don't stay silent. And this was a moment for me last week with Tequity, with Laura Bell. She said, like, the hill is not so huge. If you have staff, you can go to them. Like, I don't know how to support you. Help me understand how I can support you. And it's okay to be uncertain and to admit that you don't have it figured out and you don't have policies in place or support structures. And it's okay to be vulnerable as a leader with your staff and acknowledge that you're falling short in that area.
It doesn't take much to look, whether it's on social media, news in certain places, but there's a backlash happening for diversity and inclusion,
Yeah.
right? It's don't know if folks noticed, but it is happening, obviously. What do you think about that and this point in time? So we have groups like you're talking about, like we're talking about here, right, with Tequity, trying to make sure proper conversations are had. There's mentorship, there's understanding, there's allyship, all this stuff. But then there's this other push that's out there. How, like, yeah, just what are your thoughts?
I think when I think of it on a corporate end, I ask organizations why they got their DEI statement, why they jumped on this bandwagon. Was it to jump on a bandwagon, or is it because these are deeply held values within your organizational structure? Because if it was a deeply held value, it doesn't matter what wave is coming at you. This is something you truly believe, so you're going to continue to stand 10 toes down on it and advocate and do the work that needs to be done. If you hopped on it because it was a thing to do at the time, you need to decide if you've seen enough. You need to decide if you want, for lack of a better word, if you want to be a good person, if you want to hold values that hold equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging as your organization's values. Because there are going to be waves that say this isn't good work, that this doesn't matter, but those waves are there to protect the status quo. Because for so long, when you have privilege and you've had it for so long, anything that shakes that seems like it's taking something away from you. So DEI movement is shaking the sense of privilege, and it's scary. So it's for us to decide if we are in a position where we understand that privilege isn't rightly given. It hasn't always treated everyone properly.
Yeah, it's not about losing stuff. It's about having space so everyone can have the proper amount of space in life to thrive and do what they want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those companies that, just put out the I statement just because, they're probably going to crumble with the pressure.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same state. It's like whether it's Hawaiian Shirt Friday or their DEI statement, it's the
Right.
same, like, given the same priority, right? And you're like,
Yeah.
well, this is not working.
Exactly. Just
It's a little bit transparent too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I would like to say that most companies are being created with the intention to make profit. So if a company sees it that from the profit point of view, the people you're ignoring have a lot to offer. So if you begin to see it that way, you realize that you're losing something by not tapping into that potential. So even if you want to see it from a profit point of view, I mean, there is something in there for you. So it is even in your best interest to go for it.
There's only a few minutes left here now. I want to look back at that theme for the month, right? Black excellence, a heritage to celebrate, a future to build. So as we wind down the show, do you have any thoughts around the theme for any part of it or from this month and what it means each year, or to you personally?
The future is bright. I've had the pleasure over this month to connect with tons and tons and tons of amazing Black individuals, and I am never more amazed as when I leave my conversations with them, because I'm seeing people in industries I could never imagine doing things that are way beyond my wildest dreams. So then when I look at the next generation, I think they are going to have so many more people to look up to than what I thought I had growing up. So the future is really bright, and Black kids coming up, all the world is their oyster in ways they could never imagine.
Gift?
I would say there is also responsibility for we, the Black people. We need to speak about ourselves positively. We need to present to the next generation that we are not victims, but we are good at what we do. We are not just Black people. I am a Black woman, an engineer. I mean, I'm not just defined by the fact that I'm a Black woman, but be good for what you're doing, and whatever is trusted into your hand, actually deliver, because that's the only way we can get up to the level where we want to be, where we can now begin to impact those who are coming behind us.
Peace.
Yeah, I think that's the same thought for me. The future is really bright. For the part where we look up to people in leadership positions, I think more Black women are now in leadership positions than we had before, and that's already creating that diversity in the C-suite or leadership positions as well. And also, we can also look up to these people and say, yes, it's possible to get to that level where this person has gotten to. The future is really bright for us. Yeah.
And we are out of time. So Laura Bell Umba, Gift Umba, Peace Godwin, Jacqueline Lee, thank you all so much for this show today. Looking ahead, well, thank you if you're watching on the streaming channel thingy. Thank you too. Check out the CBC Newfoundland Labrador YouTube page for the playlist if you want to watch. We put everything up on YouTube after we do shows like this. Tomorrow, it's been a while since we've been out and about in the community. We're going to be live from Again and Again, a social enterprise that supports Home Again Furniture Bank. It's on Hebron Way in St. John's. Don't miss the show tomorrow.
This is CBC News for Newfoundland and Labrador. I'm William Ping. NAPE members protested outside the Confederation building this morning to show their disapproval of the government's decision to use the P3 model to build new highways. That model's a public-private partnership to design, build, finance new highways. As well, the union says private contractors would do all maintenance of any new sections of road